11 elite snipers, 11 flawless shots, 11 humiliating misses at 3,900 meters. The best marksmen in the military broke themselves on a target they couldn't touch. Then a voice rose from the back of the crowd. Female, steady, cold as a trigger pull. Permission to try, sir? Heads snapped toward her. Not a legend, not a decorated operator, just a quiet supply officer carrying a wooden box and a worn leather journal. They laughed. They dismissed her. They had no idea who she really was. Viper 1, the ghost sniper from Operation Ironveil, the shooter who saved 12 men without ever being seen. Watch what happens when the forgotten warrior steps onto the line. Because the deadliest person on a battlefield is often the one nobody notices until the shot lands. The Sierra test range burned under a flat, merciless sun. Heat shimmered over steel barricades, twisting the air like liquid glass. Along the firing lane, 11 elite shooters knelt in rigid formation. Rifles braced, breaths synchronized. A whistle snapped across the valley. One by one, they fired. 11 thunderous blasts rolled into the desert, a perfect chorus of confidence. And still, 11 clean misses. Not glancing shots, not near hits. Full, undeniable failure at 3,900 meters. General Marcus Reed lowered his sunglasses, jaw locked tight. He scanned the line of shooters, men decorated for impossible distances, now humbled by a target they couldn't touch. Then his voice, low and gravel-edged, cut through the thick silence. Anyone else? No one moved. The desert held its breath. Wind kicked a thin veil of dust across the empty firing lane. Then a voice, female, steady, unshaken, rose from the back. Permission to try, sir? Heads snapped around. A few scoffed. Most simply stared. Captain Sarah Monroe stepped out from the shade of the supply tents, boots crunching over gravel. She carried a small canvas kit and a thin wooden box. No medals on her chest. No patches. Nothing to hint she belonged anywhere near an elite range challenge. She walked like someone who didn't need permission to breathe. Her day had begun long before the base stirred. Before dawn, she rose in darkness, letting cold air bite her lungs. Her routine wasn't glamorous, just precise. Push-ups on concrete, sit-ups until the breath in her ribs felt sharp, then the ritual she never skipped. Stripping her old LRT-78 rifle, oiling each component, reassembling it in under 4 minutes. Her hands didn't tremble. They didn't hesitate. They moved like they were solving a familiar equation. A thin scar across her forearm tugged as she stretched, one she never explained, one she always warmed before shooting. Some mornings she ran her thumb over it, more memory than wound. Coffee simmered in a dented metal mug as she watched the mountains catch fire from the rising sun. Her eyes tracked movement on instinct. The sway of a flag, the lazy drift of dust devils, the faint shimmer of early mirage. Patterns, signals, whispers of wind most soldiers never noticed. Later that morning, inside the ammunition depot, a private dropped a crate and froze. Rounds spilled across the floor, mixed calibers, mixed makers, chaos. He muttered a curse and bent down in panic. Sarah knelt beside him, silent. Her fingers brushed across the brass like she was reading Braille. Within 30 seconds, the rounds were sorted by caliber, by grain, weight, and by manufacturer. The private stared, stunned. How did you just... She closed the crate lid. Patterns don't lie, she said, and walked away. At 0900, the briefing hall filled with officers as Major Jonathan Blake unveiled Project Aegis. A single slide displayed the range. 3,900 meters, an experimental extreme distance trial. Names flickered onto the screens, decorated snipers, competition winners, combat legends. Sarah Monroe's name wasn't there. Blake didn't even look in her direction. Combat shooters only, he announced. Support personnel remain in their assigned lanes. A few officers exchanged smirks. Someone in the back muttered, "Logistics stays logistics." Sarah heard them. She didn't react. Outside, Staff Sergeant Frank Mason intercepted her. He stood like a wall, broad, battle-tested, and certain of his opinions. "You're sharp, Monroe," he said. But that shot out there? It's not for supply officers. She adjusted the strap on her kit, looking him dead in the eye. The wind doesn't check your badge, she said. Then she walked past him. 2 hours later, the test range roared to life. A colonel rushed toward General Reed, tablet shaking. Inversion layers unstable, sir. Mirage is oscillating. You should call this off. Reed didn't blink. If physics bends, he said, I want the shooter who can bend with it. The colonel backed away, helpless. The target, barely a fleck of metal in the boiling horizon, wavered like a mirage ghost. One by one, the 11 shooters fired and failed. Wind shear twisted the bullets. Thermal pockets flung them off course. Even the most confident walked away shaken. Sarah watched every miss from a distance. Not with judgment, just analysis. Her eyes tracked microshifts the others didn't see. When the 11th shooter stepped back, defeated, Reed asked his question, anyone else? And Sarah Monroe stepped forward. Her shadow stretched long across the firing lane. Her grip tightened on the wooden box at her side. The desert heat rippled around her like an opening curtain. She walked straight toward the rifle staked on the mat. The woman no one expected was about to attempt what no one else could touch. Sarah Monroe stepped onto the firing lane as murmurs rippled across the crowd. The heat shimmered around her boots, warping the distant view like glass in a furnace. She moved with steady purpose, ignoring the skeptical stares tracking her every step. Captain Alex Cole stood beside his custom Chetak, arms folded, ego held high. He smirked as she approached, his voice dripping with challenge. If she wants to try, General, she can use mine. A few soldiers chuckled under their breath. They expected hesitation, embarrassment, maybe retreat. Sarah gave them none of that. She reached into her canvas pouch and pulled out a micrometer, its metal glinting under the sun. Carefully, she measured the bolt lugs, dial clicking with each subtle adjustment. The screen flashed a number. 0.0003 deviation, almost perfect. The laughter behind her died instantly. Cole's expression tightened as she leveled a small spirit gauge across the scope rail. The bubble drifted, settled, aligned. Your rifle breathes with you, Sarah said quietly. I just need its truth. Even the spotter paused mid-step, thrown off by the precision. Nearby, a colonel hurried toward General Reed, tablet trembling in his grip. Sir, we need to stop this. The inversion layer just spiked. Mirage distortion is unpredictable. Reed didn't look away from the target. If physics bends, he said, I want the shooter who can bend with it. His tone ended the conversation. The colonel backed off, helpless. A fresh gust ripped across the range, kicking dust into spirals. Flags halfway downrange snapped violently in opposite directions. Even experienced snipers whispered under their breath. The 9th shooter stepped up, dialed desperately, and fired. The bullet wavered, then vanished into a pocket of heat as if swallowed. Miss. Off metal, the spotter called. Shooter 10 took the mat, jaw clenched tight. He tried a faster shot, betting on instinct over calculation. His round curved out and landed somewhere in the desert floor. By shooter 11, frustration was boiling. One competitor threw his logbook to the ground, pages scattering like wounded birds. Equations, wind charts, ballistic models useless in this shifting furnace. Lieutenant Daniel Price wiped sweat from his brow, trying not to show the panic growing behind his eyes. He had trained for years, memorized every ballistics table he could find. None of it worked today. Sergeant Frank Mason folded his arms, watching the failures stack up. Hours earlier, he had told Sarah to stay in her lane. Now he wasn't sure if he had any idea where her lane actually was. Shooter 11 Cole himself took position. He breathed deep, set his shoulders, and tried to regain his shattered rhythm. His shot cracked, then drifted wide by more than 2 meters. He stared at the target feed, refusing to accept the truth. It should have hit, he muttered. But the desert never cared about should. The range fell into heavy stillness. Wind hissed across the metal roofs, carrying the weight of humiliation. General Reed scanned the shooters, jaw set. Anyone left? He asked. No one answered. No one dared, and that silence was louder than all 11 gunshots combined. Sarah stepped forward, her shadow stretched across the concrete pad. She set down her canvas pouch and wooden box with calm precision. Every movement was deliberate, unhurried but sure. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising again. Some whispered she was insane. Others whispered something else entirely. What if she wasn't? She opened her leather journal, pages filled with scribbled formulas, wind notes, and odd markings only she understood. No printed charts. No digital aids. Cole watched with clenched teeth. "That notebook won't help you," he said. Sarah didn't even look up. She removed a handcrafted round from her pouch, rolling it between her fingers. The brass reflected the sun in a razor-thin gleam. Balance perfect. Weight perfect. She lay flat behind the rifle, settling her body into the pulse of the concrete. Her cheek rested against the stock with practiced familiarity. Her breathing slowed into a surgeon's rhythm. The spotter shifted uneasily. "If she fires now," he whispered, "it'll miss by a mile." Sarah didn't blink. She wasn't watching the target. She was watching the lies in the air, the mirage waves flickering, the gusts pulling sideways, the faint tremor of pressure dropping. Her hand brushed the trigger lightly, not firing, just feeling the wall. Her eyes narrowed behind the scope, reading the horizon's secrets. As the desert held its breath, Sarah Monroe exhaled. She was ready to do what 11 elite shooters could not, and the next heartbeat belonged to her. Sarah Monroe settled her weight behind the Chaytak, letting the rifle anchor her to the concrete pad. The metal felt cool against her cheek, steady despite the boiling air around her. She breathed once, letting the world narrow into a clean corridor of focus. Through the scope, the target flickered in and out of existence. Heat ghosts twisted its edges, pulling it side to side like a mirage puppet. Every other shooter had aimed for what they saw and paid for that mistake. Sarah tracked the air, not the steel. She followed the shimmer waves breaking across the sand at 600 meters, then the slower ripples farther out. 2 layers of mirage moving in opposite directions, one rising, one collapsing. A soft tremor vibrated through the concrete under her ribs. She paused, reading it the way most read a map. A helicopter miles out, shifting pressure on the north side of the range. She adjusted 1/10 mil left, then another 2 clicks down. Her movements were quick, not rushed, like she had rehearsed this chaos. The spotter leaned closer, uneasy. "She's correcting into a distortion zone," he whispered. A senior NCO replied, "She knows. That's the scary part." Sarah opened her journal with one hand, eyes never leaving the scope. Short lines of calculations marked the page. Drop. 3.6 sec. Wind shear layer shift. 14 degrees. Coriolis left. 6 inches. Drift right. 0.3. She whispered the numbers under her breath. Not as a reminder, more like confirming a truth she already knew. Her math wasn't theory. It was memory. She rolled the custom round between her fingers once more. The brass clicked softly, a tiny metallic heartbeat. Then she seated it into the chamber with gentle finality. Behind her, Mason muttered, "This is insane." Cole stood stiff, arms locked, watching someone use his rifle better than he ever had. Price swallowed hard, pale from the earlier miss. Sarah ignored all of them. She shifted her shoulders, sinking deeper into the rifle's frame. Concrete warmed beneath her chest, translating micro-vibrations. The subtle push of a wind gust, the delayed thump of a vehicle moving behind the spectators. Every sound meant something. Every vibration added to the equation. This was the part no instrument could measure. Her breathing slowed. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. She let a single bead of sweat slide down her temple, refusing to blink it away. She needed both eyes open, one on the scope, one on the world. Her heartbeat settled into a calm, measured rhythm. The target jittered again. Not a consistent move, just a twitch lost in the mirage. Sarah adjusted exactly 0.3 mil right, anticipating the ghost. "Wind's lying to her," one sniper muttered. "No," the spotter replied. "She's listening to the lies." Sarah inhaled deep. Held, let half of it go. Her finger brushed the trigger, feather light. She wasn't pulling, she was testing, finding the wall where steel, breath, and heartbeat aligned. Then the world tightened, her heart knocked once. A second time. then hovered in the hollow space between beats. She fired. The rifle cracked with a sharp, controlled recoil, pushing gently into her shoulder. The sound echoed across the range like a judge's gavel. Then came the stretch of time that belonged only to the bullet. The round shot forward, slicing into the first shear layer. It jerked sideways, then stabilized. 3.6 seconds felt like 30. Dust spiraled around its wake, invisible to the eye but felt by every shooter watching. The bullet rose onto a hot air wave, then dropped through a sudden pocket of cold. Its path jittered, curved, and then miraculously smoothed. Cole's breath caught in his throat. The spotter leaned so far forward he nearly lost balance. Reed didn't blink. At the distant steel plate, something shimmered. A faint vibration, then a clear, ringing ting broke across the desert. Dead center. For one long heartbeat, no one made a sound. Even the wind held still, as if stunned. Then the valley erupted. Shouts, shock, pure disbelief. Price covered his mouth, staggering backward. Cole stared at the rifle like it had betrayed him. Mason lowered his head, humbled beyond words. Sarah lifted her cheek from the stock. She set the rifle down gently, almost respectfully. Her face stayed calm, steady as the moment before the shot. General Reed stepped forward, eyes locked on her. "How?" he asked softly. It wasn't challenge. It was awe. Sarah removed her glove, flexing her fingers. "Physics," she said. She paused, then added, "And knowing the wind lies." Reed studied her, something clicking into place. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Sarah's gaze drifted to the horizon, to somewhere far beyond the mountains. "Garmsar," she said quietly. "Operation Iron Veil." Reed froze. He whispered the name like a ghost returning from the dark. "Viper 1? Sarah Monroe nodded once. "Yes, sir." And every soldier on that range understood they had just witnessed something myth becoming real. General Marcus Reed stood motionless as the realization settled over him like falling ash. The woman kneeling beside the rifle wasn't just another officer. She was the ghost from a battlefield head, never forgotten. Sarah Monroe rose slowly, dust drifting from her sleeves. Her expression didn't shift, not even under the murmurs swelling behind her. The truth of her identity had hit the crowd harder than the shot itself. Reed stepped toward her, voice low. "You pulled 12 of my men out of a trap in Ironvale." He wasn't praising her, he was confirming a memory he had buried. Sarah avoided his eyes, jaw tightening slightly. "Not all of them, sir." The weight behind her words silenced anyone close enough to hear. Lieutenant Daniel Price approached next, shoulders hunched. His confidence had evaporated, replaced by shame. He stopped a few feet away, swallowing hard. "Captain, I mocked you," he said. "I was wrong. Badly." His voice cracked on the last word. Sarah didn't soften. "Then fix your math," she said, "and sweat harder than your pride." Price nodded, the lesson landing deeper than any reprimand. Sergeant Frank Mason lingered behind him, arms crossed, wrestling with his own guilt. He had dismissed her without hesitation earlier that morning. Now he looked like a man reevaluating everything he thought he knew about quiet people. Their eyes met briefly. Mason didn't apologize, he simply lowered his head. For Sarah, that was enough. General Reed lifted one hand and motioned the crowd to stand down. Troops shuffled back, creating a path between them and the tent. The desert, moments ago explosive with noise, had gone reverently quiet. "Walk with me," Reed said. "He didn't command it," he asked. Sarah followed without a word. Inside the command tent, the temperature dropped into a cooler. Static hush. A single cedar box sat on the table beside a stack of sealed folders. Reed approached it like an object that deserved respect. He opened the lid. Inside lay a silver star. Not ceremonial, not public, just a silent commendation for work done in the dark. "Phantom recognition," he said. "For actions off the books." Sarah didn't reach for it. Her hands stayed at her sides, fingers curled slightly, as if steadying herself. "That star belongs to the team," she said quietly. Reed shook his head. "You kept the team alive. Take it." He pressed it into her palm with the gentleness of a man who knew the cost of what he was giving. The metal felt heavier than she expected. It wasn't pride, it was memory. A reminder of 4 names carved in stone. Reed slid a thick folder toward her. Wraith Cell is being revived, he said. New doctrine, new missions, same demands. Sarah opened the folder. 5 faces stared back, young, sharp, untested, bright eyes that didn't yet understand the weight of precision. You want me to train them? She asked. Reed held her gaze. No. I want you to command them. She closed the folder slowly. The air shifted, thick with old ghosts and new responsibility. They don't know the bill, she murmured. That's why it has to be you, Reed replied. You walk the line between discipline and mercy. They need that. He paused. The military needs that. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She set the folder down, then rested her hand on the cedar box. Her thumb brushed the grain once, collecting courage. I'll take them, she finally said. But I train them my way. Reed nodded as if Head expected nothing less. No cameras, she added. No shortcuts. No hero worship. Deal, Reed said. Just results. Later that evening, when the base quieted, Sarah walked alone toward the memorial wall on the eastern fence. The granite slabs glowed under fading sunlight. Wind carried the scent of dust, sage, and something older. She found the 4 names she knew better than her own. Her fingertips rested on a chipped corner in the stone. She remembered exactly how that chip happened during extraction, when debris from a mortar strike slammed into their cover. A shard memory flashed behind her eyes. Smoke rolling over a ridge, a radio call drowned by gunfire. She whispered their names, one by one. Then she whispered, barely audibly, I should have been faster. General Reed approached, stopping a respectful distance behind her. He didn't speak. He understood silence was its own kind of prayer. When Sarah finally stepped back from the wall, her expression had changed. Not hardened, focused. Sharper than the moment Shed fired the 3,900-meter shot. Reed asked quietly, Why come back now? Sarah looked toward the horizon, where night pressed against the last gold light. Because they didn't get to choose, she said. So I choose for them. Reed nodded, deeply. The recruits report at dawn. Sarah saluted, turned, and walked into the cooling air. Each step felt deliberate, like accepting a burden she had long avoided. A burden she was ready to carry again. That night, she packed 2 duffels, her rifle case, and the cedar box. Inside her pocket, the silver star rested beside a single spent casing engraved with coordinates. Her past and her purpose, touching metal to metal. At 0200, a C-130 waited on the dim runway. Its engines roared as she climbed aboard. The desert shrank behind her as the aircraft rose into darkness. Somewhere ahead, 5 rookies waited to learn the cost of precision, and Sarah Monroe Viper 1 was ready to teach it. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.